We've been working on our log cabin project for weeks and weeks now, and we've been doing some of the simplest things, locking the body of the cabin together with simple notching. We've done the roofing and the purlin work, but now we're starting to move into a territory where we're not experienced in doing these this type of project. We need to do the chinking part. We need to fill in the gaps of our log. We are here at Wilderness Road State Park. I've got David Cadle, and we are on the backside of one of their buildings here. Here's a building that is half chinked, right? So half of this structure has gaps in it. Half has this chinking or daubing material here, and they've been doing this for a long time. David, tell us about what you do here at the site.
Well, here at the site, 90% of the time I'm in the blacksmith shop, but the other percent of the time we're doing just as they was in the 18th century. So we're building the buildings, we're upkeeping them, trying to keep the daubing in place, as you see, don't last very long.
Yeah.
And we're keeping the gardens up and the animals just everyday life here. So our constant battle is to try to keep these buildings dry with the shingles on them and the daubing in place so that we can keep the weather out and the critters out of our cabins. So
that sounds like a lot of upkeep.
Yes.
You got to keep this material in place. Probably replace the occasional log.
Yes,
or
we do. Sometimes the whole cabin. So the original fort, built in 1775, only lasted till 76 before it was abandoned. So only 1 year. This being the 20th year since this was all started.
Reconstructed, right.
So there's things that we're having to do now that they would never have to do with these temporary buildings as they considered them.
So you're going to teach us all about the chinking, the daubing, all that great stuff. Let's go to, you got a cabin that needs some work, right?
Yes.
Let's head that way.
All right.
So David, before we get started about the actual process, we need to get these definitions down. Tell me about the words that we're going to be using.
Okay, so with these logs being saddle notched together, you end up leaving a chink. A chink is the definition of the space in between the log.
Right.
So
the chink is the hole.
The chink is the hole, and so the chink has to be chinked.
Okay.
So you have to fill that with some material, which could be many different things, from wood chips to stones or anything, corn cobs, anything you can take to fill the space to insulate it.
So this would be chinking.
Chinking, yes.
Okay, whatever is filling this gap.
Yes.
And then
you daub it.
Okay.
So daubing is the material that actually does the sealing of it. In this case, we're going to be using clay, and we got some cedar bark and some grasses, whatever is most convenient in the area to use. And the chinking's job is to keep the weather out and the vermin from getting in there too. And the problem with the daubing itself in these first generation cabins is when the water hits these logs, they run into this the daubing, and that's the reason you have to replace it and constantly re-daub it. That's what we're going to be doing.
So tell me about the difference between the situation where we've got a fresh construction and redoing it later on.
So when you originally build one of these cabins, you got a lot of materials that is right here that can be picked up and used. So as we're cutting our notches, we end up with a lot of these
little pieces of wood chips,
And so you could take these chips and you could lay them in here. And as you lay them in, trying to get them at somewhat of an angle, because you're trying to get them to wedge in tightly so that they won't come out in time. So you start wedging them in and just keep filling all the way across like this. So you could use this in new construction. And then another way you could also do it, and just as Captain Martin has requested we done here, he was worried about being bulletproof. So when we're hewing logs, you end up with big old chunks.
Big splits.
That's off the top of this, because you would chop in and then chop off your glut. And so you could split these in half, and then you could lay these in.
Has bigger giant splits,
So like this, and that would give you a more bulletproof way, but this does not hold the daubing as well. There's not as much for the daubing to grab onto.
It doesn't leave us little keys to lock
into. That's when you're first building, but if you're having to come back as we are now, several years down the road, we don't have a lot of this material laying around.
And maybe our other stuff is rotted out or whatever.
Right, and it's time. You can see how all this is just,
just
getting loose and falling out. You could just pick up stones and do the same way with the stones. Lay those in there, which works really well. And then if you got split rail fence, such as we have around here, it's constantly getting broken by the horses and things. You could use that to stuff in there too. So
yeah, you even see some situations where they put bricks in there, all sorts of
anything
whatever.
to fill the gap. So and just like this, if you're going to put in these big chunks like this, that is going to keep the air out somewhat. So you just fill in the crack with the mud. You're not so much worried about covering the whole piece of wood. And then you go to the inside and daub the inside too, because you have to do both sides of this. And that would give your seal off for the actual weather and the air blowing through. So not so much as the look. They don't all have to look this way as long as it's sealed up and keeping the water out. That's the final goal.
So we've got our chinking in place. We got to make the mud, right?
That's right, the daubing.
What do we get? What are our ingredients?
So we've got some just red clay that we've dug up here. Most places have clay in your area. Some places it may be a little different consistency. But here we got some really good sticky clay. But the clay alone will just dry and break out. So we need to add some binder to it. So today we've got some cedar bark we'll grind up and put in it. We also have some long grasses, and we also have some horse manure. The horse manure, dried horse manure, is very fibrous because a horse don't chew its cud in the way a cow does. So there's still a lot of fibrous material in there, which will really hold that together. So we're going to use a little bit of all of it in here. And it ought to do us a really good job.
So is there a magic mix to this, or you just get it to where you feel like it's about right?
Yeah, more or less just feel to where it's about right. So we don't want it too wet so that when we pack it in there, and we don't want to add too much moisture to it so that it ain't, we want it to dry, but we don't want to dry too fast. So you would do this type of work in the fall of the year preferably, so that it has time to dry, because the slower it dries, the less it's going to shrink, and you won't have much of a chance of it falling out. So.
Well, let's mix it up.
Put a little clay in the bucket, and you could also do this in a pit. If you're going to be doing this whole cabin, you would definitely want to do it in a pit.
Big pit.
But for what we're doing today, this little bit of repair work, this bucket will be fine. So we're going to get just a little bit of clay in here. We're going to have to add just a little bit of water because so that the fibrous materials will hold good inside of there. Mix good in it. So you see how it's starting to clump together, but it's still wet because we want it to push in around all of that
squeeze into that
chinking. The more it squeezes around it and binds together, the longer it's going to hold in there. So this is just cedar bark that we've stripped off the tree. You could use poplar bark. The inner bark of a poplar tree is really strenuous material that will come off in big long fibers like this does. And so this works really well.
Yeah, you could probably use old rope or whatever.
You could.
So we're just busting this up till it's...
So you bust it up till it's kind of small so that it can give with the mud and get inside those cracks too. Don't want too big of a thing. And so we'll just try to get it mixed up a little bit throughout it. And in a mud pit, you would just be doing all this with your feet. Just walking through. And then so our next thing, we're going to add a little grasses in here too. You could use just one or the other, but the longer grasses does a really good job. I would like it better if this was dry. But this is what we have out here today. So
yeah, the green material might rot when it's in the wall. Or whatever,
and then it's going to, as it dries, it's going to shrink. So you want to keep that shrinking to minimal.
That looks like a mess.
Oh,
but we haven't really gotten to the full thing yet.
Nope.
So our last ingredient
is the horse manure.
So
they would be saving all their horse manure and putting it into a heap and letting it dry out. You would break that up somewhat fine and drop it into the bucket. And then just mix that in also. So that is a really good, where the grasses was a long fiber for some of the bigger cracks to hold it in place. This is some good small fibers to keep the cracks from being the small ones that in time would just let moisture seep in. So it's really good for keeping those small cracks down. We find the more we put into it, the longer it's going to last. We've got some here in one of the block houses that's been there almost 10 years. So that's quite a bit longer than what just clay and straw will give you. So.
And you know, people might be squeamish about the idea of working with this. It does not smell.
No.
It's just
we're using dried, not
right.
fresh,
It's
and
dry and
it's literally just grass is
yeah.
all it is.
Right.
So by letting it dry, if you leave it laying there and let it dry
Sure.
over, it'll turn to powder for you. You
Right.
just pick that up and throw it in. So.
Yeah. So how are we going from the bucket to the wall?
All right, so what we want to do, once you get it to the right consistency, you would start rolling it up,
Okay.
getting the strands into a long log like, and so you can see how that's going to be all tied together.
Yeah.
So when we lay this in here, all this is going to be tied together.
Sure.
But you want to make sure you got enough mud in that strand, it's not just all
Right.
your grasses, that you can push it into all these little
Right.
gaps.
So it locks into all those gaps.
Right. So what we'll do, we'll lay this up on here and just start pushing it in.
So it's nice when you got a hand on the back side of the wall, you can hold
Right.
that material, and maybe you'd even have a partner on the inside
You
holding
could
the
have.
chinking in.
Because you're working both sides of the wall.
Right.
And then that's one reason you want to make sure that chinking is really tied in place, so that it will hold in place, and as these logs shrink too, it would even get even tighter.
Sure.
So you want to push it in, and you don't want this to protrude out too far.
Right.
That way when the water gets down here, maybe it can drip off before it gets back into the daubing.
Sure.
But you want to get a good seal down to there. One more little handful here. Get down on this end. Really pushing it into those cracks, because that's what's going to hold it in place. Is that chinking behind it. And once you get that on there, this is not too bad. We had some pretty good mud on it, so we don't have too many fibers showing.
Right.
But if you did, you could also just take some of the mud that is left in the bottom of the bucket that has a lot of those smaller fibers in it from that horse manure, and then spread that over the top of it, and that would seal off all of those, because over time as the rain washes on it and it rolls all that clay off, those fibers are sticking out, and that's acting as a wick sucking the water back in. So you want to seal those off the best you can, and that's about all there is to it. Just making sure that it's all packed into every little crack and crevice, and then hopefully it can dry slow, and the slower it dries, the more intact it's going to stay.
Right. So you would think, I mean, here's this. How old do you think that little piece of chinking is?
I'd
Couple
say
years, whatever?
maybe 4 or 5 years old.
Right. So truly, for 4 or 5 years and in the weather, it doesn't not look that weathered.
No.
And the crack between the chinking and the wall is not very big.
It's not, because when the water hits this log and it rolls around and goes inside of that daubing, this daubing is just dirt. So it will let that water escape through it and wick itself out, so it can dry out, and then that way it gets rid of its own moisture. So even though this is turned loose of that log right there, it's not that bad of a thing. Now, modern day people want to use limes and mortars and different things, well, to try to keep the moisture out. Well, if it'll keep the moisture out, it will also keep the moisture in. So the wood is moving. If you use a mortar substance, it does not move. So the water gets behind it, and then it can't get out. So that water will go down into the cracks and things in the log, and then rot it out. So,
so you're almost better off if you've got bad chinking to knock it out completely.
Knock it out completely.
And it's probably usually these lower sections that need redone most, because the weather comes in. This is protected by the roof. Doesn't need to be redone very often.
That's right. The overhang of the roof, that's the reason it had such big overhangs, is to protect the water, the drip edge, from falling down on the outside of the log. On the shorter cabins, it's not that bad. But on some of the bigger cabins in the block houses, the 2-story buildings, man,
that's really
it's
bad.
constantly getting the weather.
And you also get splash up.
Exactly.
That washes it out. So perfect. David, thank you for giving us this great information about something that seems so simple, but is you have to know it, and unless you've done it, it's hard to understand. We are at this wonderful site. Tell us about this site.
So we're at Martin Station. We're here in Lee County, Virginia, just about 6 miles from the Cumberland Gap. So really close to the Gap. That's what originally opened up the gateway into the west. So here at the fort, we're doing everything from the blacksmithing to gunsmithing, farming, from growing our crops to raising our stock. They're cooking in the common house, as you would call a tavern today. So we got ladies in there cooking in the bake ovens, doing every aspect of 18th century life. We're trying to show everything, the little things and the big things, so people can get a good understanding of what life was like and what sacrifices people had to make so that we can have what we have today.
You got a big event coming up, right?
We do. So this coming May, May of 2020, second weekend of May, we're going to have our raid. That's what really has been our signature event over the years. It's our kickoff that starts our season. We're going to have 2 big battles in the day, probably 60 to 70 vendors, 18th century campers, a lot going on, a lot of demos going on. So, from soap making to candle dipping and everything in between. So everything that you can imagine, we're going to try to be doing it. So.
Thank you, David. Make sure to check out the link in the description. That'll send you right to this site. And thank you so much for watching.